Hey there, Squirrel Army! How's it going? For today, we're having a look at one of the Lord of the Rings commanders and having a look at Peregrin Took here today. You can join the Squirrel Army by subscribing. Alright, so it's a 3-mana legend, 2/3. Okay. Green creature, eh? So it's going to do something busted, obviously. Well, not that busted, but still. If one or more tokens will be created under our control, those tokens plus an additional food are created instead. Yeah, that's okay. Not that amazing, not that busted. But you can sack food to draw cards. Okay, now I'm kind of in. It's not that busted, but it is pretty nice and pretty strong. I think a lot of times I see cards like this, you're immediately trying to figure out like how you can go infinite with these sorts of things. And like with doubling season or with parallel lives or anointed procession, a lot of times I've thought to myself, now hang on, shouldn't this actually go infinite with this other card? But it doesn't. It's kind of a weird effect with some of these other things. Like same with Chatterfang. I was thinking that there's a way to combo with it, but I don't think that that's actually a real thing. I'm not too sure. But it's still an interesting token kind of generator in a sense. Get additional food. You're probably not going to use the food too much in your deck, honestly. Unless you're just building a random, like, green life gain deck of some sort and you're just using food for the life gain. Yeah, sure, okay, maybe. But not too certain on that one. It doesn't sound like a very strong strategy, honestly, but still, okay, sure. But I think the power here is in that second ability. Because, like, again, you're probably not going to care about those foods like 90% of the time, unless you're at a super low life total or something like that, or unless there's things that say when you're at a certain life, you do a thing, or if you've gained 3 life, or whatever, you do a thing, or whatever else you've got. Things like that. Like, again, if you're in a life gain deck, there are strategies and synergies that you might care about it. But again, if you're not in that strategy, then just sacking your food to draw cards seems pretty good. And again, even if you're in that food deck, you might be going, well, yeah, sure, I could be gaining all this life. But honestly, like, if I'm already sort of built around life gain, then what are the foods doing me? Like, they don't really gain me more life than what my deck's already kind of doing if I'm built around life gain. And white is usually built around life gain, so you'd have to kind of maybe be Selesnya, though there is some green life gain stuff, but still not nearly as much as white. But still, I think that, you know, that strategy of make some food, draw some cards, and hopefully draw into my life gain, if that's your real strategy, seems better than just, well, I'm going to crack foods and see how it goes. The thing that I was thinking about this, though, at first was I didn't realize it was a legendary. When I first looked at it, I just thought, oh, it's just another card that's a creature and makes food. And it might go into my Chatterfang deck, maybe. I'm not sure. But again, that's all right, because again, I want to, think about it. There is a couple of cards that kind of halfway care about food and treasure and whatnot, like Academy Manufacturer and things like that. So it can go really gangbusters with things like that. Though it is a bit weird, again, with cards like that. It seems like it should go infinite with cards like that, but I don't think it does, because effectively the way, like, what I understand from state-based and triggered actions and things like that, it only can trigger once, and things like that. So effectively, you get one set off of this, and then you get the other set off your other cards. Say I'm running this with Chatterfang. Initially, what I thought was, right, this thing triggers whenever I make a token. Let's say I've made a squirrel token or whatever. It doesn't matter. A sapling token or whatever. It doesn't matter what I've made. I've made some token. Both my commander, Chatterfang, and this guy are out on the field. So they both see that. So this guy is saying, create that token and earn a food. Then my commander's saying, oh, create that token plus a squirrel. Okay, cool. So I resolve either one of them. It doesn't matter which one. So I can resolve this guy first to get a food. Okay, cool. My commander then sees that I have made a food. Cool. So I get another squirrel. Cool. But then this guy should see that I'm making another squirrel, in theory, or whatever, whichever way you want to look at it. Either I can resolve my commander first, saying, cool, I'm making a squirrel. Cool, made that squirrel. Cool, this guy sees that I made a squirrel. Okay, I'm going to make another food. And then my commander should see that and then say, hey, you made a food, I'm going to make a squirrel. So it just should, in theory, keep bouncing off each other in a sense. But I don't think that that's how it actually works. Though I could be wrong. Again, I've been wrong many times, because it does sound like this is how it should work in a sense. But again, it doesn't a lot of times. I've been so wrong with a lot of these things, because they don't seem to work in the sense that they seemingly should on first reading. You read this and it says, hey, do this, then do that. Or if you do this, do that. You know. So it's tough to understand some of these rules sometimes, and some of the little things that are in there. So what I think happens, getting back to that, is if you're playing a deck like that, Chatterfang or whatever, you make a token. This guy sees you've made a token, you get a food, and your commander sees that you've made a token making a squirrel. So that's kind of almost it. I think they both trigger in the same way, and they both just create what they create, and they don't sort of trigger off of each other, which doesn't seem that logical in some ways, because they both create tokens. If one or more tokens will be created under your control, those tokens plus an additional food are created instead. So Chatterfang says those tokens plus an additional squirrel are created instead. So they're both saying instead of what you're doing, in a sense. So it's funny that, like, they're not creating tokens in a sense. It's just adding the food or adding the squirrel or whatever else it is to your trigger. So those don't affect being created. So it's a bit of a weird effect. Anything that doubles or gives you an additional or something as part of something instead is usually like this, which is often where I do get confused with some of this stuff, because you'd think, oh, this created a food. Yeah, it created a food. So surely my commander should see that, or surely whatever else, if I have parallel lives or whatever. Okay, cool. Parallel lives just saw me make a food, so I should get an additional food. But then this guy should see that parallel lives just made a food and then make another food. And therefore, parallel lives should see that I just made a food to make another food, and so on and so on and so on. So it should go infinite. but it doesn't. So you only get that first initial triggers and whatnot. So it's a little bit off from what some people think, especially me. I always get confused with these. Like, it does this instead, so you've got to realize it doesn't give you like additional triggers and whatnot. It just gives you that first additional food, and then when you like resolved it, you're all correct for a sense. So these two things happen, or whatever. This one thing happens. I make this. I get a food. Parallel Life says I get an additional one. Cool. That's it. Like, or whatever. If I make somehow 5 tokens or whatever, I get 5 food. Oh no, you get a 1 food. So I get those 5 tokens, and I get twice as many of those tokens, making 10, and then I get a food, and then I get an additional food from Parallel Lives. So, yeah, that's how that kind of works. So, I thought I would kind of break that down because I wanted to do it for my own understanding as well, just to get this into my head that it's not as good as what I think it is. It won't go infinite, and of course, I don't have to go infinite to a degree in that deck to win. Though it's feeling more and more like it sometimes. But again, it's just one of those things. It's just so tough sometimes when you're playing games against people that are sort of playing at a very high level and your deck's a very hit and miss deck. Um, so you just kind of feel like, I wish this thing would go infinite in a way, because that would mean, hey, look, I actually had something to do. Not just, oh, I made some tokens. I hope I can survive till next turn and see what happens. Like, I don't know. But still, it's an interesting commander. Again, I didn't really realize it was a legendary when I first sort of looked at it, because it's sort of innocuous in a way. It's not going to really feature that much, I don't think, in the face of any decks. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe someone will want to build that food tribal deck or something, whatever. I don't know. I think it's more of a 99 card that helps support certain commanders. Chatterfang, of course, my favourite, going to be one of them, potentially at least. So it could slot into decks like that. There's a lot of green decks that are token decks, or green-white decks that are token decks. I don't know how much you want something like this. It does depend on kind of what your strategy is all about. If you are a kind of green-white food deck or something, or just green-white life gain and tokens or something like that, maybe. But yeah, it's tough. But I think the card advantage, again, is where you just like, well, whatever. I can run this in any deck and just sack the foods to draw cards when I need to. And that can happen at any point. It is that you have to sacrifice 3 foods to get 1 card. So it is a little bit of a higher cost in a sense. But they couldn't make it just like sack a food to draw a card, I guess, to a degree. But certainly you can still, if you get a lot of food, eventually draw a lot of cards. So that's really good for 0 mana. Like, you still have to sacrifice 3 for 1, but still I would rather sacrifice 3 foods to get 1 card sometimes than gain 3 life, especially for 0 mana. That's way better, and whatnot. So yeah, that's what I think. I'm still sort of sitting on the fence as to whether I can find space for this in my decks. I didn't find space for Academy Manufacturer in that deck. But again, it doesn't make a lot of food, clues, or treasure or anything. It does make some, but not a huge amount. This could slightly change that equation. But again, would it be enough? Tough to say, because you've got to be actually making tokens. You can't just have your Chatterfang or whatever else out there that says, if you make tokens. Cool, I've got all this stuff that says, if I make tokens, I make more tokens or whatever. But I don't have any stuff that actually says, make a token. And that's the problem. There's so many, or there's so few really good token generators in green. So it's tough for me to say, again, this would be a good commander as far as a token deck. I think a lot of mono decks are often at a disadvantage, but you still could do it, obviously. But again, it's just sort of very tough. But again, I do think that it's probably better in the 99 of a lot of decks. There's hardly if any other decks. Actually, Queen Arneal, or whatever her name is, Ainarel, whatever her name is, she wouldn't be hard pressed with this because you get a soldier and whatnot, so that's not too bad. But yeah, I don't know. It's tough to sort of figure out because again, it's a very specific token. It does deal with those tokens itself to help you out in another way. So again, it can be useful in any deck, but you've got to be generating tokens. So yeah, I don't know. It's tough to say, but certainly an interesting commander. I don't think, as I said, it's a very good build round, but again, if you're already doing this sort of thing, or you really have been looking for food tribal, then maybe this is a card you want to think about because it is a pretty decent effect. Again, kind of parallel lives type of effect to a degree, giving you some other token that you can keep generating while you're getting value out of all your other stuff, just to give you that additional token and whatnot. And then just, again, free card draw. Or just like, if you're really in a pinch, 2 mana to gain 3 life. So maybe, I don't know. But anyway, guys, you guys can always let me know what you think. Write your thoughts down there in the comments below. Hope you've enjoyed this one and hope you'll join me again in the next one.